Hey, friends, welcome to the 55th Lazarus Symposium, running live. I'm in the studio here in Bacalar Laguna in Mexico, and I'm trying to do something ridiculous, which is to speak to my audience through the Lazarus platform, and at the same time, I'm streaming through my Instagram using my iPhone just to kind of bypass the deplatforming that's been going on. I'm here for another 2 weeks. And then I'm headed to Los Angeles, and I will be doing the Conscious Life Expo on the 20th of February. And I will be on the 8 p.m. on the 20th. It's a pretty important talk that I'm doing. To me, it's certainly very important. Curiously enough, I've been graciously invited to do all the three main expos. The Conscious Life Expo followed in Los Angeles, followed 2 weeks later by the one in Palm Beach. That's the New Life Expo. And then the following month, I'll be doing the Conscious Living Expo in San Rafael back in, I think that's in California as well, I'm pretty sure of it. In any event, my purpose for going back to the US 3 times in a row to these expos is to speak to what it is that we're unveiling in the New Earth movement. And that is the biggest thing we've been working on for some years. This is the year 2026. I've been very excited about this pronouncement. When do we get to the point where we're taking back some real measure of autonomy and sovereignty from the third party intervention? That, of course, is what the whole New Earth movement is about. It's what the Lazarus Initiative is about. It's what my own life's work has been about. It is about stepping into full jurisdiction in the simplest terms. So whilst in 2024, end of 24, throughout the whole of last year, as those of you who are following my travels know, I was just moving non-stop, multiple times to Africa, Asia, Africa, Central and North America, and seeding the New Earth micronation jurisdictions. So those are moving forward nicely, and those formal announcements will be coming this year, certainly in the first half of this year. But the big piece is the unveiling of the New Earth Exchange and the New Earth Treasury and the New Earth Bank. So those 3 things, an exchange, treasury, and a bank, are what I'm doing the soft unveil at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles in a couple of weeks' time. This is the first people's exchange of NFTs and of cryptos. So with the bank, and we were just on this morning, my whole team were on with the bank. That is so exceptionally exciting. Everyone will be able to this year have their own bank card, have their own money, own their own money, absolutely, in an inward-looking a jurisdiction that is tethered to the so-called real-world jurisdiction. So you can use that card in ATMs, you can move your cryptos around and your this, that, and the other around, so fiat crypto. It's really the indivisible line between the old satanic system and the real 0-point economy that we've been slowly building our New Earth Nation movement toward. And that all lands and docks this year. It's going to rely on people of the world to either get it or not and participate or not. But I can tell you it is incredibly exciting because we've never been in a position, I say we, humanity has never been in a position where we could truly restore ourselves into our true jurisdiction, because money was always the issue, was it not, friends? And who controls the money and who controls what you can do with it or where you can send it and how you can spend it. So that was always how the Babylonian priesthood and the Khazarian mafia have always orchestrated the world in that way. So the point being here, it's very, very exciting where we're now headed. Very, very exciting. That's the big piece this year, is the bank, the treasury, and the sovereign exchange. We've got over $5 billion worth of government projects, infrastructure projects that are going to be listed on the New Earth Exchange. This is not just an exchange for you and I, for people who understand sovereignty and understand the crypto world and understand decentralization. What I'm saying to you is we've also got very, very big entities realizing that where we're taking this, they're going to have to transition as well. And what does that mean? It means that people of the world will be able to buy tokens and NFTs and cryptos connected to building of bridges and schools and clinics and product development and anti-gravitational technologies. And all of that can now be listed on our exchange, okay, within a very consolidated ecosystem. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be doing the soft unveil at these expos. And then on the 20th of March, I believe, March, I believe we've chosen that date line, which is the equinox, to do a huge unveil or hard launch on the World Wide Web. So that will be announced from the 20th of February to the 20th of March. There's going to be a big marketing campaign to try and get eyeballs in. And then on the day, on the 20th of March, we're planning to do the big hard launch. So please, everyone, stay tuned to that. We'll make announcements on the Lazarus platform, on all the New Earth platforms, and on Sacha Stone platform to that end. What better way to introduce Jane Evershed, my beloved matron-in-chief of the pundits that we bring forward through the Lazarus Symposium over the last 5 years. And I do believe Christy is controlling the studio. I'm hands off the console for the first time, which is delightful. But please welcome Jane Evershed, who is, I am told, turning the spotlight on me. Go for it, girl.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Sacha, and it is even better to be in the cockpit for once. So I just want to start out by, I've always wanted to tell you this. I wanted to say thank you so much for giving a platform to people like me, Dave Emery, and so many others who academentia would put a whip to and send them packing. And I really appreciate that. So I wanted you to know that right away. And then you and I, we've got a kind of a history going back with Tartaria, almost like 6 years or so. And I've noticed, and I'm wondering if you've noticed this too, and how you reconcile it with your current thinking about how the world is going forward now. But we've seen Donald Trump has said he wants the World Expos to come back. And just recently, he said he wanted asylums to return. And then we've got Elon Musk with all his anti-gravity stuff. We're lifting off the ground all over the place in shoes and bikes and mopeds. And it's looking so eerily like the end of Tartaria before. But more than that, Sacha, we've got the underground children coming up from the dumbs. We've got all the rescue of the sex trafficking children. And we've got this huge immigration swells into countries, almost like replacing the existing. And then on top of that, we had the COVID culling of the population. So it's almost an exact replica of the end of Tartaria. So how do you reconcile that with your future of the world? Because it looks pretty eerie to me.
Very good. Christy, you might want to just maximize frames when someone's speaking for the purposes. Thank you. So that's a terrific question. And the way I see it is not quite the way that you do, because whereas the fall of ancient Tartaria was a takedown of a golden age, a grand epoch of extraordinary prowess, consciousness, electrification of the planet, frequency technology, extended life, and so on and so forth. But that elevation of art and beauty that eventuated into the grandiosity of ancient Tartaria, that was a golden age, clearly. I mean, just go back to the Mahabharata, go back and understand arcane history, look at the last vestiges of the Golden Age architecture that you can still see in Rome and Paris and Vienna and Chicago and Philadelphia and London and Johannesburg. All around the world, we're still seeing the last vestiges of that great age. People are still not in the mainstream computed what happened. They still think that men with little buggies and chisels created those cathedrals and buildings. But that's no disrespect, but that's the great unwashed, intellectually speaking, who still can't see beyond the civilizational cognitive dissonance and the dystopia. But those of us who can see and who have been paying attention and realize that we had the Vimana flying anti-gravitational technologies thousands of years ago, that even up until a century or so ago, we had these technologies extant. That was a takedown of, so the reset that occurred there with the takedown of ancient Tartaria was a takedown of a golden age. Fast forward to today, which answers your question, and we're seeing a takedown of a Saturnian satanic sleep cycle that has occurred in a compression state since the takedown of Tartaria till today. In point of fact, we're moving into a resurrection of a golden age. And of course, there is an interweaving and an interfolding of paradigms, technologically speaking, psychoculturally speaking, intellectually speaking. There's an interweaving, there's a crossing over. So the Elon Musks of this world are coming in with Optima and extraordinary technological breakthroughs, which are foundationally still captured within the Luciferian age, but they are promising to free us up from the mundane, from the drudgery of that Saturnian age. But they're still leading us, in a sense, into I wouldn't say a kill grid, but I would say into a Skynet, a grid that is still going to be containing and monitoring and surveilling everything and calculating everything by AI and trying to contain and continue to harvest humanity through a Luciferic upgrade from a satanic scenario. But here's the thing, it's not going to work. It's going to appear to work. It's going to work in some sense, but the technology is simply going to allow for humanity to take stock and to begin to dwell upon our own navel, so to speak, and to begin to recognize that we are the technology. Because where do you go after Optima? Where do you go after some fucking 4-foot android is trundling around after you, picking up your litter or making your breakfast or giving you a blowjob, as I said to the bankers early on the call today? Who knows where these little servant class androids are taking us? One imagines it's going to lead us straight into appetite. It's going to be that people are going to be having full-fledged relationships with their androids within 3 to 5 years. That is an absolute certainty. So that is part of a transhumanist agenda. That is a Luciferic age agenda that is trying to create a capture 2.0 of human plasma. It will not work. It'll have a backfire mechanism, which is that it'll decentralize things sufficiently and deconstruct the kind of wage slavery paradigm sufficiently for humanity to sit back, breathe for the first time in millennia. And those are then who are operating at heart frequency and above, meaning to say angelic indigo, fractal antenna, DNA frequency in capacitance. Those who are able to actually be real humans are the ones that are going to see immediately through the folly of a Luciferic upshift and literally end the contract. So we are going to see that full bifurcation from people choosing still to live in a simulated reality, which is AI augmented and which offers absolute freedom and the apparency of that. And then you're going to have people like us, dare I say, who actually want to completely terminate the contract with the corporation altogether. And moreover, who have learned how to do it by now. We understand law, we understand jurisdiction, we understand history, we understand the ancient compacts and treaties that indentured us into lab rat wage slavery, and we're not having it anymore. And we don't need to have it anymore because the Luciferian guard that are taking over from the Saturnian satanic guard, they will allow for that bifurcation because they cannot contain or control it. So you're going to see people leaving the grid, moving into these utopian micronation satellite kind of enclaves and communities and micro civilizations. Certainly we've started seeding already new earth. It's exactly what I'm doing in Africa and Asia and Central America ultimately, but we're focused, the big picture is focused on African micronations and then Asian micronations. Ultimately, that'll become the antidote to the luciferic capture, and people will begin to feel it, because people don't want to be cosseted, looked after, and nannied beyond a certain point. They want to get back into the mud. They want to make shit with their hands. They want to feel, the hurricane, the breeze of a hurricane. They want to get into living and embodied living. Embodied living. You cannot be embodied fully if you're living in a luciferic Elon Musk sponsored a grid system or Skynet system. So we're going to see that bifurcation continue between the perfected simulation humanity paradigm and the true angelic indigo human paradigm. And we know which side of that line we're standing on.
Well, I've always thought that Tartaria meant little Tartaria, and that we were at the point where we don't need those domes and buildings and churches and cathedrals anymore, because this is our dome.
Yeah.
So we're moving forward in that way on an organic level. And the other thing is that when you have coherence, especially organic coherence, it just dissolutes the distortion and the inversions anyway, and they can't function because the resonance has become so high. But that's just a comment. This is all about you, Sacha. So let me go to my next question. Thank you for that. It was fantastic. People are placing a great deal of expectation, and they put a lot of meaning onto you and what you're doing. So for those who may not realize the scope that your work covers, could you walk us through what you've done in service to this transition to New Earth, and perhaps what you've built and put in motion over the past decade or so? And also, I want to add too, what inner practices have helped you stay coherent and long-sighted over time? And at the deepest level, are you primarily driven by a sense of injustice or something else entirely?
Okay, thank you. And excuse me drinking coffee. I can't bear it when I see people eating or drinking on podcasts. And I thought I was off screen. That's why I was stealing it. But curious enough, the technology I use is caffeine. So there you have it. So my technology is caffeine and the odd rolled up organic cigarette. So I have both of them in front of me. And I also have, as I've been pointing out lately in interviews, the technology of the Hopi, and I've got the technology of the ancient Mahabharata as well. Oops, here, which I've showed multiple times. The Vajra Dorj, which I rely on, and the Australian talking sticks, which are the clarifying technology that banish bad spirits. So, in simple terms, I've lived a life of irreverence and being outside of the main frame. So I was born, as you know, similar to you, I was born in a war in Africa, and then in apartheid, and then I was a refugee for about 9 odd years, and then got into kind of my own shock doctrine through rock and roll and poetry and what have you, and then that morphed into activism, frontline activism. First, it was citizen diplomacy from 1999 up until about 2003 or 4, and it was around about 2004 when it landed. I'd met with sufficient leadership to realize that I was moving not just against stream and upstream, but it would never ever amount to a hill of beans if I just continued to talk up peace and to talk about ideas and come up with solutions and put them out there. That wasn't going to architect or engineer a paradigm shift. And so that was a tremendous despondency came over me at that time. And I realized I had to move further onto the front foot and become more irreverent in that sense toward imposed authority. And that's exactly what I did. I then started to reconstruct my foundation and the work I was doing from citizen diplomacy and peace initiatives and intercultural, interfaith kind of focused stuff, and trying to network leadership into having dialogue. That was the emphasis of my work. And that was where I understood the premise of diplomacy and became very, very adept at it. But then I moved into hardcore, what you would loosely call research. I've never claimed I'm a good researcher, but I did get pulled into the basement, and I started having conversations with the leadership about that stuff, about the Masonic occultic element and aspect, which led to the satanic, and then the occultic blood ritualistic, and understanding the grotesquerie of the civilizational basement, so to speak. And once I got to grips with that, I couldn't walk away from it, because once you see the truth of something and you understand about the children, you understand about the sacrifice of innocence, you understand about the trafficking, you understand about how the Catholic Church and governments formed to become this enslavement technology that is predicated on ritual sacrifice of innocence, and that is the baseline. So you learn that, and you either join the club and you become, I guess you can live the rest of your life out moderate in some kind of modicum of security in Monte Carlo or, you know, Geneva or whatever, as these priest banker motherfuckers do, because they know what's going on, but they turn a blind eye. They kept their foot in the door. They stay out of it themselves. They don't necessarily get involved, but they become the enablers of the satanic status quo. That then drip feeds down into academia and the entertainment complex and into media, and becomes the technology that captures humanity into the status quo and makes the status quo acceptable and normal. And that's the horror of the mundane, horror that you then realize. So I moved hard then into researching and learning about that. Then I created the New Earth Project, because I realized I would have to, come out from behind the curtain, because prior to that, I would never do public speaking. I was too terrified to, and probably didn't believe sufficiently in my own voice anyway. So I used to get very brilliant people, a couple of whom I still work with, Dr. David Martin. You know, I would bring David in to give speeches at the United Nations. I'd get Justice Chris Cleverly. I didn't want to do things like that. I always steered stuff from behind the curtain. And there was a given day when I realized I had to put all my currency on the table. And that was in 2012, 2013. And then I stepped out and started doing public speaking. It was very, very well received, which would shock the hell out of me, because I never thought I had any capacity for it. And then I got to a point where I decided I would never allow myself to be scripted. I would always parachute in. And if I couldn't speak to something on a stage freely, in pure truth, in the living moment, then I shouldn't be speaking. So I started to form this, again, my irreverence started to forge a very unique and integrated approach to activism, to dealing with the shit show of reality, which is to be as bold as a lion and to lean into life every day, and to be fearless and to be timeless as well. So I then put out a short film, which with Belgium television, on Beyond Time, Money and Fear. That became a thing, became a popular meme at the time, and triggered the genesis of the New Earth template. And then I set up the International Tribunal for Natural Justice in 2015. That was 10 years ago. Went through 3 years of getting rocks at the head before we launched our first Judicial Commission of Inquiry in Westminster, London. And that then led to getting some kind of recognition on the world stage, not in the mainstream. They're still castigating and vilifying and trying to demean and diminish me at every opportunity. So the death threats have continued all the way. Last death threat I received was about 20 weeks ago. So, 4 or 5 months ago. So those still go on. I still get letters from powerful military intelligence folks warning me. I have visits saying, settle down, step back. I've had police come to my home and sit down, talk to me. I've had serious players warn me, defense ministers warn me. So I've had all of these warnings and this, that, and the other over the years, and every time I've ignored them. I've said, thank you, yes, thank you, I understand. But my sense of irreverence is still more alive in my nature, my character, than any reflex into fear or advice from third parties. So that's my technology. My technology is irreverence to any imposed authority, and to only follow the inner dictate. That is what I've used. That is who I am. I continue to use that inner dictate, and it is right most of the time. It's always right in the long term. In the near term, it's right and wrong variously, and we have challenges and obstacles. We crash and burn and have to rebuild and reset things up and take things forward. That's just life. And stamina is the other piece, to have, I think, superhuman capacity to take a punch in the face, rock at the back of the head, and to still get up, dust yourself down and go #fuck you all. I see what I see, what I see. I know what I know, what I know. I'm born to this world for a period of time in this fictional hologram, and my will be done. My will be done. That's how I've taken things forward. And as you know, Jane, and thank you for your kind words at the beginning of this, I've reduced an incredibly complex kind of maelstrom of chaos and of psycho-intellectual fucking weirdness into simple algorithms. That's what I do. So when I talk about elevation of art, beauty, consciousness, 7 years ago, that was what I was talking about, saying that's the piece we need to understand. Elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness becomes an immediate means by which we can begin to transcend the mind fuckery of the status quo, of the endless, relentless propaganda. And that then moved into understanding the trifecta of technology, fellowship, and jurisdiction. And then I've been promoting that in the last few years, which is understand what jurisdiction is, claim jurisdiction, embody it, enact it, and then bring technology in as well. And bring fellowship, which is the most important thing of all, is how do we engender fellowship in this world? So I've been working on those three things. They now lock and load into what is now emerging this year, 2026, which is true cost economics / 0 point social ecology, 0 point social economy, which is the ultimate escape from the matrix in that sense. So that's a distillation of my method, my methodology, and I forgot the last half of your question. Forgive me.
Don't worry about it, Sacha. You're already 4 questions ahead with everything that you just said. So you're completely tuned in. The other day, I heard you speaking, and you happened to mention your guardians. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I must ask him about that. So do you mind telling us about your guardians? That aren't those little sticks and things, those little things you got lying around, are they? More than that, surely.
No, nothing to do with that. Again, I use sticks and copal like we all do, just to cleanse and purify, a given environment. No, I am the cleansing technology. So I'm sufficiently conscious to know that I am the technology, that this actualized Kundalini, this being here, the being and the doing are the same thing. My being has become my doing, and my doing has become my being, and that is the cross. That is the cross that we bear in pure truth and in right action. Life fucking hurts. Reality hurts. I don't numb the pain. I don't take synthetic molecules or any kind of substances to dull the pain and to hide from my supernature. And to realize one's supernature hurts. It's a journey of dragging yourself oftentimes across broken glass to get there, but we have to do it if we're serious about consciousness, and if we're serious about enlightenment, and if we're serious about achieving the mythic idea that we have of ourselves, because each of us believe that we have some mythic prospect ahead of us. We all want to fulfill this archetypal image we have of ourselves in our mind, which is to become the magician, or become the king, or become the great mother, or to become the Magdalene, become the Sophic or Christic wisdom keeper, or whatever the fuck it is. We have a mythic idea of who and what we are, and we're always wanting to merge into that. The problem is we're oftentimes led there down the wrong path, and we use simulation to live out that fantasy of what we are, but we don't actually arrive there to our supernature in an organic, sentient way. And that's the great disconnect. That's where every human being is blighted by appetite and by addictions. And if we can transcend our appetites and our addictions, and frankly, the appetite and addiction is the same thing, Once we can cross that line within ourselves, we can move into the bodhisattva. We can move into that state of real mythic status. I am in service to others over service to self. That is just the way it is. So I am prepared to bleed. I'm prepared to hurt. I'm prepared to take the systemic abuse and to not be rewarded in the manifest or material sense, because what I'm doing is the gold. What I am being and doing and represent, the living principle that I stand for, is the gold, is the philosopher's stone, is the ormus. And that's what each of us are led to. Now, we oftentimes forget, and this is getting to the answer of your question, we oftentimes forget the fact that we are also significantly supported from the hyperdimensional realms, significantly so. The situations that I've been in my life where I've dodged bullets and escaped death when forces have tried to kill me. And there are a handful of scenarios there, which you're probably aware of, and those who know my work will be aware of some of those stories. But what I noticed in just the top of my mind, three instances that come to mind: the eve of me bonding the International Tribunal with my thumb, with my fingerprint, in 2015. And balaclavaed goons were sent ostensibly to kill me the night before, just after I'd dropped the Bishop of Jerusalem off at his accommodations in London, because he'd flown in to help consecrate the tribunal. And late that night, getting back home, I got mugged, or I got intercepted by balaclavaed goons before I could get from my car to my front door. And it was British Special Forces guys who intercepted that and literally, in my view, saved my life that night. That's something I lived through, and it was awful. And it was, for me, there's so much that happened in that moment because things slowed down, and I will at some point write about it. But I saw a protection cloak arrive around me personally. And I saw this also in North Africa on one occasion, being hijacked at gunpoint in the desert, and with one Bedouin guide who was prostrate with a gun at the back of his head, and me being remonstrated with by these very aggressive guys with turbans and camels and automatic weapons. And something happened to me on that instance when they were screaming at me with a gun at my face, telling me to get off my horse and get in on the sand on my face. And there was no part of me that would accept third-party intervention. There was no part of me that would accept that. And there was no fear whatsoever. None. Absolutely none. And under normal circumstances, thinking about that situation, I was going to be dead. I'm out there in the desert trying to meet with a terrorist leader. Shouldn't be where I'm going. That was some of the dangerous shit that I was doing back in the day. So that I remember, again, time dilated in that instance, and I saw my own protection emerge. And it was absolute. I am the authority in any venue in this world. In any venue in this world, I am the authority. And knowing that, that's where the knowing and the being coming and locking in to be the same thing becomes the armor of God. That's what I'm trying to get across here. So, then of course, when I was poisoned, and many people know that story, that was 9 years ago. Those three instances are three particular instances. They're not the only ones. There are a few others, but those three were ones where time dilates and you really begin to understand that there is a hyperdimensional physics at work. So now the other night, I'm going into my room and having a really very, very, not a hard time at the moment. There's just so much on. And, we're all variously dealing with our different inescape in our life and having to, weigh and measure and balance our emotional body, our psychological body, our biochemistry, and all the things that are going on. And I was exhausted, and I went to my bedroom, and I went in the dark to my bed, and I was finding my way through the dark. It's a huge room to get there. So if I turn the light off at the wall, I have to somehow navigate a whole bunch of different objects and not bang myself. So I've got quite good at it. But this particular instance, I remember navigating myself in pitch black, getting to bed and thinking, isn't it incredible? As a child, I was so filled with fear of the dark. And yet now in my ripe age, there's zero fear. And I just thought, oh my God, of course. And I sat on my bed in the dark and I just remembered my guides. And I honored them. And I did a little ceremony on my bed in the pitch black. And I invoked my guides and they appeared. And there they were. And it was just thank you. Thank you. How easily we forget that we are carried in this world by invisible forces. And in some cases, it's the spirit of your departed grandmother or your departed beloved or whatever. In my case, it's not. These are totems, animal totems, and extra dimensional figures, and strange kind of goblin-y also netherworld entities that kind of tokolosh, like, you remember the tokoloshes in Africa. Yeah. So I just allowed this beautiful little family around me, and I said, I just want to thank you. I go through years on end without ever thanking you for being the guides, and you are the guides, and you are the ones who come and wrap around me in those life and death situations in life. So, and it occurred to me how desperately important it is that each of us begin to actually acknowledge the fact that we are carried and supported by our guides. And when you can befriend them and begin to see them in this realm, it's an immensely powerful thing.
I would absolutely agree. And I would also love to say that I'm happy that you survived all those things to tell your stories too. So my next question is, I was recently listening to you and you were saying that the first part of 2026, that the world is not going to be the same again. And you also mentioned that you hosted, I might be stepping on toes here, Sacha, forgive me if I am, but with white hats from Asia, North America, and elsewhere. And I'd love to know if you can give us any highlights that came out of that meeting and what changes you know about from insiders that you talked to.
I would need to really sit. I was watching Elon Musk yesterday on something came up in my feed. And I thought, I really like the way that he can be asked a question, a pointed question, and he doesn't jump to an answer, even though he's incredibly quick mind, and he could easily formulate an answer. I love the way that he just sat for a long time. It was like 47 seconds of agonizing silence with the camera zooming in slowly. And he was just going further inward and thinking and really reflecting before he answered the question. So that's one of those questions that I would need to reflect on. But all I can say is that because there are so many permutations to it, and I've got a quick fix answer to it, and I've got a really abstract answer to it, but I can tell you that I'm at a point where I have met so many people in the military intelligence complex around the world. And I'm talking Russia, I'm talking Asia, I'm talking North America, I'm talking Europe, principally, and Australasia, actually. I have met with so many whistleblowers. I have met with so many sensitives, remote viewers, mystics, oracles, viziers. I've met with so many kings and queens and hereditary leaders and very powerful shamanic indigenous leaders. I've met with so many political leaders and office holders. I've met with so many pundits and experts in academia in all of these different spheres. And coming to the question, why last week I convened a meeting of powerful people involved, you could loosely call them white hats, involved in the emancipation of humanity through the financial reset, basically. People holding trillions of dollars worth of federal safekeeping receipts and collaterals, bonds, Genesis treaties, historical notes that underpin the calamity of the existing global financial system. And I also know people who are sitting behind the screens, pushing the buttons, coordinating the clearances of those funds that are moving around the world, variously from screen to screen, but not quite popping into the mainframe yet. And so I've been involved since 2005 when I was one of the, I wasn't a placeholder, but I was a trusted agent in carrying essentially trillions of dollars worth of federal safekeeping receipts in a suitcase. My foundation was instrumentally involved in trying to get the Federal Reserve at that time to free up and return some of the monies owed to these federal safekeeping receipt bonds over many, many years to countries in Asia. And I worked, I've got to be very careful what I say here, so I'm going to just stop the conversation there before it gets political. But I've been involved at that level in this movement toward the Great Reset. Last week, I thought, oh, fuck this. I've just got to ask people from 3 continents, can you come together and have a conversation and see if we can unlock some of this stuff by flashing our kimonos all at the same time. And they were all equal to it. It was a great meeting. And it began a number of conversations. So I made introductions between those 3 continents to some of these hats, and now they're involved in different conversations and threads connected to the gray screens, the off-ledger funds, and so on and so forth. And we'll see what we see emerge. But it's just one way of me wanting to move through the endless obfuscation of this reset, because the fact of the matter is that Donald J. Trump does not know when that reset is going to happen. And I have military generals and people on the phone almost every day, certainly every week. I'm communicating with hereditary leaders, with kings, with people who are controlling the screens, and each of them are variously good, really good humans, wanting emancipation for humanity, but being cock-blocked one way or the other in their in the way that they're advancing their instruments or their mandates. So the question then becomes, who or what is maintaining this endless blockage? And why does the Iraqi dinar never quite happen? Why does the Zim note never reach value? Why does the quantum financial system never quite land? Why do we not have all the radios and television sets on the planet instantly going into a planet-wide broadcast to tell about the Clintons and the Obamas and all that? Why do we never seem to meet that event horizon where the real shift point becomes palpable and known to everyone all at the same time? Well, the fact of the matter is it may well be that never actually happens, that we never end up having that shift point. It might just be that it's a kind of slow dissolution process of the satanic status quo as people become individually emancipated and then realize, I get it, and then move out of the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil and start to actually manifest and embody their own will in this world. I think it's something like that is about to take place. I don't know that there's going to be a singularity event horizon that's going to occur. I know some people are yielding. Some of these off-ledger funds are now moving into utility. It's a fascinating, incredibly ambiguous and esoteric story. I know that we, New Earth, with our exchange, our bank, and what we're building forward and what we've been engineering now for a long time, I know that we are able to rely to a great extent on some of those collaterals in where we're taking our own inward-looking economy. But that white hat meeting was me trying to also get the answer to the question that you just asked me. And I don't have a finite answer. Doesn't matter how many conversations I have. There is no, and I'm speaking to people also directly connected into the Trump circle. I'm also instrumentally involved in getting people to go and petition and get the meetings with Trump. So who fucking knows is the answer, Jane. I have a feeling it's connected to morphogenetic upshift, and I think that is a numbers game. I think that's an equation that we're about to hit, and once we hit that, it's going to be twofold. It's going to be connected to the degree to which a certain demographic of humanity are able to override the synthetic intervention of their own DNA through substance abuse, alcoholism, agrochemical and pharmaceutical systemic poisoning. So there's going to be a sufficient catalyzing moment inside where your own plasma, Christed plasma, is able to negate the geometry of the devil that's forging inside your DNA. That's happening. It's happened to me already, and it's continuing to happen. And I'm seeing it happen to others. So there's going to be a threshold event where that happens sufficiently, because the activated Kundalini and plasma from the inside is recorrecting the false light geometry. But there's also a macro event out there connected to the galactic plane, the ecliptic, the age of Aquarius, the fact that we've now moved in and are densely committed into the field of the photonic light, the vibral light, which is now impacting our solar system. And that is having a palpable effect on every so-called atom, so-called molecule and cell in our biology. So that macro event and the immanent internal awakened event are coming together to create that catalyzing point. I just don't know that it's going to be a singularity as we've been led to believe.
And I would also call that point movement toward coherence and possibly ascension. But that's just me. Now I know you have only, I bet you I got one question left. So
you can go as long as you like. If this is going well, I mean, I'm happy to push back, but it's Christy's the boss in control.
Yes. She said 1 hour and I'm listening to Christy. But I'm torn between a question about Charlie Kirk. I really wanted to know what you were meeting with him about. And the other one is a fun question for you, Sacha. I want to know all about your airships.
Okay. Oh, Lord, you just asked such loaded questions. All right. In the first instance, I didn't meet Charlie Kirk. I'd been invited through Scott McKay, the organizers of a talk I think it was, I can't remember, the 29th of September, I think it was last year. It was days after Charlie was murdered. I was supposed to be on stage with him and Scott McKay, and I was greatly looking forward to meeting him. And I flew into the United States for that very reason, and I was at our New Earth Tanasi land with Ethan and the crew out there, waiting for that. I was looking forward to meeting with him. Alas, alack, he got murdered, or was he? You know, he died, or did he? It's very, again, ambiguous and enigmatic, that whole situation. I'm at a point where I genuinely think he was taken down. I don't think that that's a simulation event, but I never got to meet him, so I can't speak to it. I think he was a very important archetype, very relevant to today, clearly very brilliant, clearly very godly, clearly ultimately led by his conscience, which is the very thing that I think probably ended up causing his demise. And the problem there was because the phones were going crazy when the day he got shot. My phone lit up and would not stop for a couple of days. And I was also vicariously communicated to Candace Owen through a very close mutual friend. In fact, I was hoping to meet her shortly after that happened, but that didn't eventuate. I mean, I've had a very long conversation with Candace Owens in the past on a number of shocking issues where she called me wanting a certain information and wanted to interview me, which I turned down at the time. I did not want to be pulled into that level of exposure through her podcast, because the work I'm doing is still too fragile to warrant being hauled into too much of that kind of spotlight. But the bottom line is I didn't meet Charlie. I think that what killed him was the fact that he had unwittingly been inveigled or led into allowing his shtick to be engineered and orchestrated by Sabbatean interests. That's pretty clear to me. And by the time he awoke to that horror, he'd already crossed the line. He'd already done the deal. He'd entered the contract, so to speak. And you see, that is exactly why I walked away from the devil's contract many, many, many years ago, because it's an absolute science. If you commit yourself to it, there's no such thing as getting your foot in the door. And if you commit yourself to it, you are owned lock, stock, and barrel. And ultimately, the silver bullet can and oftentimes will find you. if you try and step out of the contract. So I think that puts paid to that piece. On the airship side of it, can't say too much other than that we are and have been in dialogue with the leading airship manufacturers that I'm aware of in the world. And curiously enough, that's an Israeli group. And we are most likely going into some kind of partnership. My wonderful partner and director of the Africa New Earth program is a industrial hemp guy, and he's leading the whole hemp exercise for us in Africa. That's a huge prospect. Again, that'll be listed on the New Earth Exchange when it goes live, but that is industrial hemp across the whole of Africa. We've petitioned parliaments and kings and ministers, and we've gone to these various meetings, and the laws are changing now in Africa, partly, I guess, because of the lobbying that me and my circle have been doing in this area. We've been explaining, and I'm getting to the airships, we've been explaining to government and to leadership in Africa that the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was the death knell to the hemp industry back in 1937, when Congress was bought by the petrodollar hegemonialists, the oil and gas barons, because they wanted to destroy hemp. So they outlawed marijuana by demonizing that and turning that into a political hot potato at the time, used that as a step toward outlawing the derivative of the marijuana, which is the hemp industry. Prior to that, as many people know, every farmer in the United States by law had to farm a minimum of 200 acres of hemp. Now, had that maintained sustained since 1937, had every farmer been farming 200 acres of hemp since 1937, there would be zero debt in the United States today. Forget about 20 or 30 trillion, whatever the fuck it is they owe. There would be zero debt had hemp continued, and had the oil and gas lobby not managed to buy Congress on that day and outlawed marijuana with the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. So that's a monumental historical calamity, which I worked out in my brain in the last couple of years. I thought, what? That's what it all goes back to. And then we looked at it and went, hang about, 1937, what else happened in that year? Well, the Hindenburg came down. The great Zeppelin, Hindenburg. That was the big 9/11 of the day. That was a psyop. Prior to that, airships were everywhere. Those ancient Tartarian buildings were built as tethering stations. The Chrysler building, many of the buildings in New York today were built, that are still up, were built with tethering stations to these docking onto airships. All around the world, when you start to research and see what was going on hundreds of years ago, airships were everywhere. And that was humanity being able to move seamlessly across imposed political borders. And we need to resurrect airships and hemp, because those are the two things. One represents the elevation of humanity off the horizontal plane into the vertical. And the hemp is an industry base that can be grown anywhere in the world and can manufacture 62,000 products off one plant. One single plant that was gifted to us by extraterrestrials millennia ago. There's an incredible story to the genesis of marijuana on this planet and who brought it in, when, and why. But it was literally a gift to humanity to emancipate us. So we can extract graphene, ceramics, oil, fibers. We can make literally every single thing in my studio here. I'm not sure about the mirror, but pretty much everything. We can make telephones out of hemp. We could, using hemp graphene, we can make silicon chips. We can make all the furniture, all the cement, all the asphalt on roads. Every single thing can be replaced by hemp. And that's just the fact of the matter. And it's something which, if it was locally grown and then locally processed, and now we've got these automated hemp trains, that's what they're called, where you put the hemp in one end and it does the separation of the bast fibers and the microfibers and the oils, and it makes all those separations. Then you go straight into 3D printing, cast and mold and extrusion technologies, and all of a sudden you've got your bicycle, your toothbrush, your wheelbarrow, your ladder, every goddamn thing you need. You can literally design and make at home wherever you are in the middle of Mozambique, which, curiously enough, is why we're in Africa setting this into motion. So that means the end of all exports, literally all All. You might need to bring in copper wire or cobalt or a few rare earth things, but in the main, you've certainly wiped out 95 to 97% of all imports, cheap hawk shit from China or whatever. It's no longer a thing. So the World Trade Organization, which was always a calamity, is out. Everyone gets back into autonomy, sovereign jurisdiction, and we can share technology, and knowledge transfer should then be shared so that everyone is sharing the engineering, the designs, the technology, the geometry, the mathematics, the physics, and we can all then move into a monumental upshift of humanity back to a true golden age, but one that is predicated on the organic and the sentient. So watch this space. Later this year, we've already got an order for 2 new Earth airships from one of the governments that we're dealing with in Southern Africa. We'll see how that goes this year. That's something which later this year we look to launch the aerospace piece. I don't want to speak ahead of myself. We are, just what's that ghastly expression? Balls to the wall right now. Under-resourced, we've got brilliant people in our teams, but we're now launching the exchange, the treasury, and the bank precisely in order to consolidate how we want to take forward aerospace and quantum engineering and computation, all of those abstractions. So optimists, beware, because the living humans are the ones that will be claiming and inheriting this earth. We will not be walking around with androids doing our business.
Well, that brings us to the end of the hour, Sacha. So your timing is perfect. I was going to ask you about sound kind of versus water, because you were saying earlier that sound is it. That's it. Going forward, it's all about sound. I'm saying no, it's about sound and water. But I feel like the water carries the memory and the resonance. But that's too long for now. And I want to thank you so much again for having me and trusting me enough to ask you these questions. And it's been wonderful being here today.
Thank you, my darling. Love you so much and look forward to embracing you.